Hello, I'm AlanBondar, aka The Unraveler, and this is a series shifting episode. When I started using the term anti-faithist, I initially thought in terms of being opposed to using faith as a method by which we can find God, thus the term anti-faith theist. And while I would still be an anti-faithist by that definition, my friend Barry Isaacs pointed out to me that I have been using a broader definition than just faith as it relates to God. As it turns out, I'm not just an anti-faithist, I'm an anti-faithist, one who is opposed to using faith as a method for discerning or establishing anything. Faithism, were it a dictionary word, would mean using faith as a method of determining truth, justifying belief, or guiding action. I am opposed to using faith for all of those things and anything else I may have missed. Faith is just not a reasonable method of determining anything because anything and everything can be taken on faith. There is nothing that can't be believed by faith. So faith is simply an unreasonable and unreliable method of determining truth, justifying belief, or guiding action. Another reason I'm switching to using antifaithism is because I recently came across a book written by Chris Stedman called Faitheist: How an Atheist Found Common Ground with the Religious. Shortly after publishing Faitheist, Stedman explained this term he coined in an interview with the Washington Post. He said, "Being a faithist means that I prioritize the pursuit of common ground, and that I'm willing to put faith in the idea that religious believers and atheists can and should focus on areas of agreement and work in broad coalitions to advance social justice." Now, by faith here, Stedman certainly doesn't mean faith without any evidence in the way it is used by those who are religious. He means hope or confidence that believers and atheists can work together to advance social justice. Now, this sounds great in theory. I don't want anyone to think I'm opposed to finding common ground with theists. I am opposed to using faith as a way of accomplishing that. But I'm not enemies with Christians, just the method they use to justify their belief in the supernatural and to determine the Bible should dictate how we live. I do not see how there can be any area of agreement when faith does not use reason or moral agency to determine what social justice even is. Social justice to a person of faith is whatever their holy book says it is. It is what God says it is. A Christian will argue, as the guests I've debated on the Unraveler show have argued, that slavery is acceptable if God endorses it. You see, those who use faith to arrive at their conclusions for morality have no morality. They are simply automatons obeying a dictator. However, it is my contention that a lot of Christians don't actually care what their holy book teaches, and they follow their own opinions on what they desire God and Jesus to be like. These are hybrid Christians that still use faith when it comes to believing a God exists, but faith disappears when it comes to believing that the Bible is completely true. Thus, I can find common ground when it comes to things like social justice, assuming it's with a Christian that doesn't use the Bible to determine anything about life. What can I say? The Bible is probably the worst book we can use to find anything to help us out with social justice. Unfortunately, there is no common ground with those of faith when it comes to how we go about determining reality. Stedman is playing the hokey pokey. He's got one foot in and one foot out. The sheer fact that Stedman suggests that atheism doesn't have to be defined only by rejection of God, but by positive engagement in the human community shows that he doesn't understand what atheism is. You can't define atheism as a positive engagement in the human community because atheism isn't something we do. It's simply the default position of those who do not claim that God exists by faith. They are polar opposites of one another. An atheist trying to find common ground with someone who uses faith to determine what social justice looks like is like trying to pretend you can be pregnant and not pregnant at the same time. Again, don't get me wrong. I'm a total humanist, which means I can find common ground with people who happen to be Christians, not because they have faith, but because they are humans. However, their ideology, their system and method of faith is something I have no sympathy towards or respect for. I can find common ground with another human who happens to be a Christian if God is not part of the equation. Why do I say that God can't be part of the equation? Because in order to discuss morality and reality, we must be able to use reason, not faith. And there is no reason for God. You're either a theist or you're not. You're either a faithist or you're not. So I am still an anti-faithist, but only because I'm opposed to thinking you can be an atheist and endorse faith at the same time. That is an inherent contradiction. But I am also an anti-faithist, one who opposes the use of faith to determine truth, justify beliefs, or guide actions. Being an anti-faithist automatically makes me an anti-faithist. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Going forward, this series will be called Antifaithism. In the next episode, I will return to where I left off and discuss how morality works in the humanist model.